I'm very happy to welcome you to our pre-ultimate webinar that we are having today, the 11th one. We will have one more, the 12th one, which will be about rights of nature and ecocide. In 2 weeks' time, very interesting topic as well. It's going to be in German. Today we are talking English because Heba is from Pakistan and Tim is German, but at the moment he is stationed in Washington, DC, and their presentation is in English. And also lots of people that are interested in this topic, ecocide and Islamic law, are coming from other countries, and so it is very good that we are holding this topic in English, so more people are able to see it and understand it and watch the recording. Yeah, I'm going to introduce our 2 speakers with a couple of words. Heba Ali completed her studies in London. She's from Pakistan, and one of her modules in her studies was Islamic law, very reasonably coming from Pakistan. She's currently enrolled, as Tim is, in the program at the George Washington University. Her strength lies in legal research. She has worked for 6 years at a civil law firm in Pakistan and has also taught law at 4 universities in Karachi.
Yeah,
More information. Sorry?
Sorry? No, I said yes, that's about it.
Yeah, more information you can find on our website, where you find all the information about the webinar. And Tim completed his law studies in the German town of Münster, and then now has joined the George Washington University in Washington for a Masters of Law program. His focus in Münster was public law. He's worked and done research in renowned law firms and at the Institute for Local Government for a couple of years. And he has successfully completed various classes in Islamic law and is very eager to connect his knowledge now with environmental law and policy. And we are very happy that you 2 are prepared to give us this webinar today. And yeah, I hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wolf. I'm going to share my screen and let's see. All right, you should be able to see only the slide now, is that correct?
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Wolf. Correction, I'm not enrolled in the program anymore. I graduated. But everything else was correct. Yes, we're very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for this opportunity to present on ecocide and Islamic law. We are going to say something about ecocide briefly, just for those who have not joined the previous webinars. Then we're going to talk about why Islamic law may be relevant for the Stop Ecocide campaign, give an introduction to Islamic law, the sources of Islamic law and criminal law, categories in Islamic law, and then talk about how does ecocide fit, if at all. Talking about the environmental protection in Islamic law, how international criminal law is perceived from an Islamic law viewpoint, and then how ecocide could fit within these categories that we identify earlier. Yeah, so I'm not going to get into detail, but like I said, for those who may not have attended previous webinars, which I highly recommend, by the way, to review them on YouTube. The Stop Ecocide Foundation convened an expert panel in 2021 that created this definition of ecocide to be implemented in the Rome Statute, which is the governing statute of the International Criminal Court, ICC, exercising jurisdiction over international criminal law. Any amendment to the Rome Statute requires 2/3 of the states parties to support this amendment and ratification by each of the states. And the definition that the panel came up with, I'll just read it briefly. For the purpose of this statute, ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. Like I said, I won't get into detail, but yeah, you should review the previous webinars that get a little more into detail. Why are we talking about Islamic law and Stop Ecocide in the Stop Ecocide campaign? And I want to start with a little disclaimer. Islamic law is pretty broad, can mean a lot of things. This is going to be our perspective, and from our understanding, it's necessarily oversimplifying. And we should all keep that in mind. Islamic law is implemented and enforced very differently across the world, and it's not the same everywhere. And we're focusing on broader concepts rather than nation states right now, because even though this is the reality today, but I just want to make clear that we're having this disclaimer up front. So when I'm going to talk about Islamic law or the Arab region, then it's obviously going to be oversimplifying the vast diversity of cultures. But this is necessary for this theoretic analysis that we conducted. Islamic law, what it is, we'll get to in a minute, but generally it's the legal foundation for many countries in the world, or has at least strong influence on the legal system in many countries throughout the world. 25 states use Islamic law purely, and others have codified legal systems that follow Western models, but subject many of their laws to Islamic law. And 7 of the Islamic law states or countries have ratified the Rome Statute. Those are Afghanistan, Comoros, the Gambia, Jordan, Maldives, Nigeria, and Tunisia. Like I said in the beginning, we need widespread support to implement ecocide in the Rome Statute. 2/3 of the member states will have to agree, and therefore also Islamic law countries. And then there's a couple more reasons why we're talking about Islamic law or the Islamic context in ecocide. First, we see a lot of environmental problems. We just mentioned the cyclone heading towards Pakistan. Many of the environmental crises that we're facing today appear in the global south, which many countries, not all of course, have some Islamic background. So many of these people are disproportionately affected by climate change and environmental crises that are, on the other side, mostly caused by contributions from the global north. And this is what we call climate injustice or environmental injustice. And then just another small thing, not so small maybe, but definitely worth mentioning, is that the ICC has been criticized of being neo-colonialist. We have not seen any investigations by the ICC or the prosecutor in countries outside the African continent until 2016. This is especially a problem in the environmental sector because most of the behavior that contributes to climate change happens in the global north. We emit most of the greenhouse gases, etc., and then the damage oftentimes occurs in the global south. So I think it's just fair to consider different regions and different cultural backgrounds and that also comes with Islamic law. People have demanded that Islamic law plays a bigger role in the ICC. None of the judges or prosecutors have any background really. So in that, none of the panelists on the Stop Ecocide Foundation have any background in Islamic law either. I found that pretty surprising, but we thought we should change that and get into Islamic law. Please, Hebam, tell us about it.
So, yes, I belong to a Islamic society myself, and I've studied Islamic law, as Wolf mentioned before. So the whole idea is that when we talk about the religion Islam and these societies which are governed by this religion, we give it a lot of priority, even when we are deciding cases, although the system is common law mostly, but even that is influenced by Islamic law. So all those principles, penalties, how should I put it? They are basically in line with Islamic law, so they cannot contradict each other, right? So when we talk about our religion, Islam, we come to the conclusion that, okay, we have to refer to the holy book, which is Holy Quran, and there is a hierarchy, okay? So the hierarchy is that first, of course, we refer to the holy book as the holy book, and even all the laws and everything has to be in line with that. Then came down the example of our holy prophet, and whatever acts he performed in his lifetime, it was a big example for us. So if, let's say, there was something missing in the Quran, or let's say some areas were silent, then we would look at Sunnah. Okay, Sunnah is practices of Holy Prophet. Later on, obviously, when he passed away, then people were looking for where else who should we talk to or refer to if we have a problem, and who's going to interpret it. Okay, so then came the two more methods, basically, ijma and qiyas. All right, now there's more, you can say that there are a lot of sectors and they have the same principles, but their way of practicing is slightly different. Okay, but that does not mean that holistically you are not looking at Islamic law in a uniform manner, right? So whenever we are interpreting laws, the hierarchy is going to stay the same, and we are always going to look at the principles which are coming from Quran, Sunnah, ijma, and qiyas, okay, and in the same order. So that's why this is the second point, which is different legal schools and relevance Islamic legal scholars, that is more to do with modern times. And why it's relevant here is because obviously, yes, we do have the holy book as is till date, but we have different scholars and different jurisprudence, different interpretations of Sunnah and Quran, right? So since Ecocide is now becoming, I would say, is now more concerning, and people are actually paying more attention to it, we realize that we don't have much on environmental law and Islamic law at all, actually. Like in my study as well, there was nothing in my textbooks or anything, but we had to look it up, like how are people developing it? So the whole idea is that we have to address this issue under Islamic law as well. You cannot just completely ignore it when something is happening globally. So where would you classify it, and how would Islamic law be able to govern it? So if there's an issue regarding some environmental change or the ecocide, for example, right? So in countries like Pakistan and Egypt, what are they gonna do? Will there be any penalties or not? So that's the whole point why we're talking about Islamic law and how we're gonna address it. Okay. All right, on to the next slide, please. Yes, so when we talk about criminal law in Islamic law, so obviously there are there's civil law as well, then there is family law as well. Then there's criminal law. So all these branches come under Islamic law as well, because it's a, you can say it's like a tree trunk with various branches. Islamic law is going to have its own opinion according to the religion Islam, let's say about divorces or contracts and abortions or crimes, basically. So if we refer to ecocide as a crime, we will have to look at these three terms. I'm not sure if you people are aware of these, but these three are classifications how you can penalize a crime. Okay, so number one is hudud. That's how you pronounce it. In Islamic law, we refer to this as a fixed punishment for certain crimes. Now, fixed punishments, we refer back to God. We refer to God as Allah. And when we talk about things that are forbidden by him in our holy book or through practices of Holy Prophet, we know that there are fixed punishments for, let's say, drinking alcohol or zina. Zina is, adultery, for example, or theft. So these are basic crimes everyone would refer to as murder, like killing of a human being and stuff. So there is fixed punishment for such crimes, and there's no dispute. Like whoever is a scholar, wherever they read, even if you look into Ijma, Qiyas, Sunnah, Quran, you will find a uniform decision, how it should be dealt with. Next is taz'ir, and this is very important because our understanding of the research is that ecocide should fall under taz'ir, okay? Because taz'ir is a term in Islamic law which refers to discretionary punishment by a judge. Now, a judge has to be, of course, reasonable of a certain conduct, how it's everywhere in the world, and then he should be the one prescribing the punishment, like who's suffering, who's doing this, who are the victims, how is the environment being affected, and all of that. By taking all of that into consideration, the judge will have the authority. Now, this will also be in line with common law and setting precedents, because this is something new that we are looking at, right? We don't already have this in Islamic law. And like I mentioned before, that it is evolving and there's more awareness now, especially in South. So people need to understand what are they going to do with it? I mean, okay, if someone's really destroying the whole forest, are they even going to talk about it? Are they going to go to International Criminal Court, or where are they going to go? We're going to take the issue. We're very clueless about this right now in Islamic law. So the punishment can be imposed for such offenses, and it has to be morally wrong. The whole idea of environmental law is that it is damaging to the environment, which is morally wrong, and we want to save the planet and the earth. So the whole philosophy, I would say, would be for the protection of the environment. And if someone is not protecting it, then that person has to be penalized in some way or the other, right? But when we talk about Islamic law, like I said, it's very silent, and we are proposing that taz'ir would be relevant because hudud is absolutely silent. We don't have this anywhere in Quran or Sunnah so far. The last one is siyasa, and it is an Arabic term. It can have different meanings because it refers to policies and regulations, and it falls, I would say, more towards promoting justice or regulations, basically, how you're going to deal with them. And it talks about public law, governance, and those areas. So once you know, okay, this is a crime, then you can further move to siyasa and say that, okay, how will this be regulated? But first, it has to be established as a crime and penalized, right? So, yeah, for the understanding of these three terms, the criminal law will have these three in Islamic law under that umbrella. And then we'll know like which crime will go under which heading, basically. That's pretty much it from my end.
Thank you, Heba. Let's see. You have already mentioned that environmental protection in Islamic law, not sure how much it's included, but I'll get into that in a second, and then you'll talk a little bit more about international criminal law from an Islamic law perspective, and then we'll readdress where Ecocide fits. So let's see. I've already said that Islamic law is the primary source of legislation in many countries, and therefore also can be the source for environmental laws and policies. We do, like you said, have not really any environmental crimes in those sources that you mentioned, but we do see traditional Islamic sources and teachings that require Muslims to, for example, manage nature sustainably and not exploit it, to provide care and stewardship for the environment. So generally speaking, we can say that environmental protection is deeply rooted in Islamic tradition and history and the sources of Islamic law, but the criminalization of environmental destruction maybe isn't. There are 3 principles that guide Islamic environmentalism that are pretty interconnected and not very separated. Those are trusteeship or stewardship of the environment and environmental protection, meaning that humankind is not a proprietor nor a disposer that can use the environment as it wishes, but rather a trustee of the earth. It's actually a principle that is also prevalent in US environmental law and globally, meaning that like the states are the trustees of environmental resources and ecosystems on behalf of their citizens. Secondly, the creation, meaning that everything, including the environment, was once in perfect equilibrium and harmony, and humans should keep that in mind and try to get back to that, assume their responsibility to pursue this equilibrium and harmony, which we've pretty much lost over the centuries of industrialization during our era of Anthropocene. And then the responsibility of humans to act as stewards to preserve this creation, basically a combination of the two. I also want to mention that Western colonialism has also been in the legal sphere. So there's been a lot of Western influence on Islamic environmentalism, and that we should always keep in mind. Now, the countries that are predominantly Islamic are slowly realizing the importance of environmental protection through the law, and therefore adopting environmental protective measures, including through environmental laws and regulations. For example, when considering the environmental effects of certain projects like infrastructure, industry, and mining. Sustainable development goals and environmental protection have been codified in constitutions, legislation, and industry guidelines, etc. So we are seeing a recent, like, emerging environmental legislation across many of these countries. Though I would like to mention that most of those are focused on human survival and well-being. So this is more of an anthropocentric justification for the protection of the environment. This is especially interesting when we consider whether Ecocide is ecocentric or anthropocentric. This is not the question of our webinar, but I know some people are thinking about that. So just to keep that in mind from the Islamic law perspective. And then in addition to that, we've recently seen like a faith-based or theocentric foundation for a more balanced and nature-centered protection of the environment. So that's pretty interesting. Heba?
Sorry, yes? Okay.
What about international criminal law?
Yeah, so now how we want to link the two is the question, right? So basically, when we already know that international criminal law recognizes ecocide as an issue, right? So when I said that we have to include this in Islamic law and it can be classified under taz'ir, what I meant was that because it is a judge-made decision, and all judge-made decisions are based on a criteria, right? So it has to be in line with those same principles, so there is no injustice happening. Now, for example, that international criminal law, whenever they penalize something, they're gonna be using the following principles: accountability and justice, prohibition of crimes, due process, fair trial, universal jurisdiction, and they're making sure that they're restoring justice. So any law, I would say, cannot be beyond these principles, because then it cannot be just or it cannot be legal, either or, right? So in international criminal law, which we know that it deals with punishments of individuals and who have committed serious crimes, and if we classify ecocide as a serious crime, then it should be penalized too, right? So for example, I would say that ecocide should be treated in a way how you treat genocide. Like, people make a big deal out of genocide, and they should be equally, there should be equal awareness of ecocide as well. It's growing with time, yes, but again, in Islamic law, there hasn't been much development. But if we talk about judges and we talk about accountability and justice, then the whole idea of Islam is that it emphasizes the importance of accountability and justice, and there would be nothing wrong if we use the same principles and include ecocide into Islamic law as well. And so individuals who are responsible for their actions obviously are the ones that are going to be accountable for and will be penalized. And it's the same everywhere. When we talk about prohibition of crimes, that's when Islamic law will, or does, I mean, Islamic law does, what do you call? Sorry, 1 second. Islamic law takes into consideration that crimes like, for example, theft, burglary, or rape, or adultery, false testimony, these are big deals. And these crimes, they are going to be prohibited, and we know that they are prohibited from day one when we look at Holy Quran or Sunnah or even Qiyas. So no one can have a different opinion on these. So similarly, with genocide and ecocide, it should fall under this, and it should be penalized accordingly as well. So you cannot just leave out this whole element and something that is going on and just not pay attention to it. That's the whole idea behind including ecocide as an issue or as a crime in Islamic law. And it should be given equal importance as we refer to human beings and how we are affecting them. And because now the environment is also of utmost importance with this whole global warming and whatnot. So we cannot just leave the issue behind. It has to be based on principles of justice, compassion, and respect for the environment, just like how we respect the human life. With due process and fair trial, again, Islamic law gives it utmost importance, and it talks about principles of fairness, and you cannot punish anyone until that person is proven guilty. So all of those things should be in place, like right to legal representation or evidence, and prohibition of ecocide, basically. So the treatment should be uniform, and they should align with the same principles as they are being used by international criminal law. Islamic law should also, I would say, the jurisdiction part, when you talk about universal jurisdiction, because so many countries have adopted this, then you cannot just ignore them and say that their law is not important or it is not in line with international criminal law, because what we're trying to do is that using the same principles, we want there to be uniformity, and we want Islamic law to follow the same principles, and so far it does with regards to all other crimes. But because we want to introduce a new head, these same principles should be applied to ecocide as well. When we talk about restorative justice, Islamic law is a just law. It will never, like I mentioned here, that it's not gonna penalize anyone unless they're proven guilty. So same should be applied here. And while punishment for crimes is very important, because then otherwise there would be repetitive behavior, efforts should be made to make sure that there is harmony, not just among its people, but within the environment as well, and the whole society. So if we talk about compensation and restitution or forgiveness, they can be important too, but penalizing it first and setting a precedent, I think, would be more important to show the world that, yes, this is a crime. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. Thank you, Heba.
Okay.
Now let's just summarize what we've already mentioned so far and discussed. If we oversimplify ecocide as meaning the protection of the environment through international criminal law, well, my analysis is going to be based on this oversimplification. So like I said, environmental protection can be found in Islamic law, like the rationale, the reasoning, etc. It's there. We just need to make the connection with international criminal law. Now, Quran and Sunna clearly do not encompass ecocide. Also, it's more or less a new concept. I know it's not that new, it's been 50 years, but Islamic law is a little older than that. So anyways, we need to look for it elsewhere. And like we've said before, Sunnah does include principles of criminal law that can explain or that also align with international criminal law from this Islamic law perspective. And then these principles we can apply to environmental law and protection, so that any environmental deterioration could possibly be met with criminalization following these principles. And then, like Heba mentioned before, where we can't really find ecocide in Quran or Sunnah, so we're going to categorize it as taz'ir, which is independent from these classic sources, but a supplemental field of Islamic law, requiring a detailed and well-founded justification of the criminal punishment, which we have provided by showing that it is like environmental protection as a goal is included in Islamic tradition, so that we think that when judges engage in discretionary punishment of committers of ecocide, then that's possible through taz'ir. Would you like to add anything?
So I would say that yes, at the supplemental level, you're right about that. But if we talk about just the broader view that it is a crime, then it doesn't matter which supplemental head you're putting it under, as long as you know it's a crime and you're penalizing it. So it goes under criminal law, under Islamic law, and it just needs to be acknowledged as a whole by these Islamic scholars. So there is uniformity, and everybody knows that, okay, Islamic law can also adjudicate upon these matters, and especially the jurisdictions where Islamic law is is a primary source of law.
Right. I think I'm just gonna skip the challenges that I thought about and would like to end with, because of the time, and would like to thank you guys for listening. And we're open to questions, of course. Thank you.
Anyone?
Thank you very much, Tim and Heba. That was really very interesting, and I think a very important topic. As far as I see, there are no questions at the moment. There's one hand raised, please. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Stop Ecocide for organizing this wonderful webinar. I really learned a lot. I'm from Bangladesh, so even though my country does not specifically follow Islamic law, but there are laws that are there to protect the sentiments of the Muslim majority population. So I had a question in that regard. I think Miss Heba will be able to relate to this and answer a bit. How in countries like ours, how religion does not always dictate directly. Religion does not directly dictate religion, but the laws. But however, when the laws are mostly in for respecting the majority of the population, and in that regard, when in these regards, what happens is most of the voices of the minorities or the sentiments of the minorities often get overshadowed. So in these cases, it's more like the question is more from an advocacy point of view. How would you also advise to advocate for inclusion of other minority religions in that regard? For example, Hinduism, or maybe Christianity in my country, or Buddhism. So if you could reflect a bit on that.
Okay, so if I'm not wrong, what I understood from you is that you're talking about how other religions are also going to inculcate this into their law, right?
Yeah.
So that no one is left out, and I'm just only talking about Islamic law. No, that's the whole idea. Like when we discuss international criminal law, and if we use those same principles, so all the jurisdictions are going to be using those principles of criminal law, right? When we talk about fair trial, due process, or accountability, justice, these are the foundational, you would say this forms the foundation of any jurisdiction or any, I would say, any religion as well, right? That you want to make sure that everyone is safe, basically, and no one is being left out. So whenever you're coming up with a new law or a precedent, regardless of the religion, I would say, it should follow these standard principles. And like we discussed taz'ir, that when we talk about a judge-made decision, it's going to be based on these values, and it is going to be in line with everyone. Everyone's gonna be happy because they'll be like, okay, they followed the rule. The rule is that there has to be a fair trial. No one can be punished without proven guilty, and you cannot penalize anyone without enough evidence or something. So I would say using those principles, because they are same everywhere. And if a judge is coming to a conclusion, regardless of the religion, it will always be the right one and can be a precedent. I hope I'm right.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You want to add something to it?
Do I want to add anything? No,
Yeah.
Thank you, Heba, for that response.
Thank you
Advan,
so
did it
much.
help you? Okay.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
No problem.
And there are no further questions as far as I see. Please raise your hand or even just speak.
So someone just posted in the chat, and could you say what the current status of Ecocide being introduced and adopted in the EU is? Well, I can try, but Wolf, you're probably more familiar with the current developments in the EU.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. There is actually at the moment very important discussions going on. The European Parliament has agreed on a compromise which uses the definition of ecocide that Tim mentioned at the beginning. The word ecocide is not mentioned, but since they are using the same definition, it is actually the case that in this compromise, for the first time ever, ecocide is proposed in international law. So this is a very historic moment, or it was a historic moment, because the compromise is a couple of weeks old, and yesterday and today, so very a very current thing. The debate is going on between the Parliament, European Parliament, and European Commission and the Member States, and they are discussing this compromise as we speak now. Probably yesterday they started, and they haven't reached a conclusion until yesterday evening. So they are discussing it today further. We do not have any answer at the moment, but yeah, it is now is a very, very important time in history, actually. And of course, we will use all our channels to then talk about whatever comes out. There's another question. Yes, please.
Entertain what?
Oh, sorry. So I had another question. Would it be possible to entertain that, or if we have time to entertain
Yeah,
that?
go ahead. Ask your question, of course.
Yeah. So so this is something I have experienced, or I have seen in my country, which is, there are some religious leaders. What they do is, at times, in some specific incidents, there were cases where parts of the river was being grabbed, and it was being used for construction of mosque. So what happens is the river ecology is being destructed, but at the same time, advocates for environment cannot really protest against it, because this would also hurt, religious sentiment. So this might also cause chaos. So, there's this small contradiction, or in terms of belief. So does Islamic law address that? I mean, what does it prioritize more, the faith, or the construction of structures of faith, or the protection of environment more? If you could reflect a bit on that.
Okay, I want to answer that very reasonably, because the thing is that I would still prioritize protection of the environment, because the issue is not the faith or the mosque, how I see it. Okay, that's my very personal opinion. What they can come up with is an alternate or some kind of a compromise where they pay a compensation or something, and then they ask them that, okay, not here, or you can build a mosque there, for example. It doesn't have to be on that river if it's really jeopardizing the area, the situation, or not protecting the environment, in short. So I think protecting the environment should come first, because people, when they have their beliefs, even in my country, sometimes you're right, like there's chaos and they go crazy with their beliefs. They don't interpret it the right way. They're not objective about it at all. So that's why if you include it, this goes to court, let's say, and you talk about that, how should this be dealt with, which is more important? No, both things are more important. We're not taking the beliefs away, we're not taking their sentiments away. We're just giving them a different place to build a mosque, and then please go to the mosque and pray. No one's stopping them. But the whole idea is that don't build there where it's causing harm to the environment. But obviously there has to be an objective person who gives this a statement and comes up with some kind of a compromise.
Yeah, thanks. It's an interesting discussion, and actually it leads to a question that I wanted to ask. First, I wanted to point out that in the belief of the Stop Ecocide movement, it is much more about the prohibition of the destruction of the environment than about the punishment of crimes. I think this is a very important topic. So we don't want to punish people. We want to save the environment. So this is for me personally a very important thing to point out. The question that I had is regarding religion as well. We have seen that the position of religious leaders are very important. When the Pope actually it's about 4 years ago now, when he first very clearly stated that ecocide is a crime, that gave the whole movement a very great push. And especially in Islamic countries, I mean, it's just my guess, the voices of religious leaders are probably even more important than the voice of the Pope is in the Western world. So my question is, how could we proceed in Islamic countries? So what religious leaders are there that could lead this topic and really bring a broad change? Do you have any ideas about that?
Tim, you want to go say something? Should I go first?
You can go first if you want to.
No, okay, so the whole idea about this webinar, I think we're talking more about future rather than addressing what's been going on, because we know that there's not enough awareness. And with these scholars, I would say that in future, these people should also form like groups or try to have a movement going on to create more awareness. And you're right that the idea is not to punish people, but to protect the environment. I completely agree with that. So I think more awareness would would push people to protect more than punish. You know, so once they're more inclined towards protecting the environment, they would, they would abide by the rules and they would refrain from destroying the environment. But right now, like, people think that, okay, the property here is really cheap, let's buy it, cut the forest, build this, build that, whatever, because everyone is just trying to create their wealth. You know, that mindset needs to change. There has to be more compassion, I would say, even when we're just talking about environment and not just human beings.
Let me just add that it's a great point, Wolf. Thank you for that. So I completely agree. It would be very helpful to have religious leaders in the Islamic world calling for ecocide like the Pope did. I'm not aware of any of the Islamic leaders having done that yet. So should probably research a little more and find out. And if not, push for that to happen. Absolutely. Yes. because they have such a very strong influence and like a leadership function and provide guidance to
Yes.
millions of Muslims.
Yes, I mean, these things on an international level, I think it's not that difficult to do, I would say, because if, let's say, there's already a movement going on, for example, Stop Ecocide, right? And if those people collaborate with even like 2, 3, or some group of lawyers or some group of scholars who are in, let's say, Islamic law countries, they collaborate and start that, I'm sure it will grow, just like how feminism is such a big deal now, even in Islamic law countries. And I think they went too far with it, to be honest. But yes, there was awareness, and people are very aware of it now, and they consider it even while deciding cases or appointing judges. There's more, for example, diversity now. We have more female judges now. So there are changes that are coming about. It's not like that it always goes to waste. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. That sounds very hopeful. I just saw another, well, it's not a question actually, more a comment, but I'm thankful for that. Floor, as I would pronounce it, said at the next COP, it is in an Islamic oil producer country. And so maybe this is going to be a very important chance for Europe and the northern countries to push for a recognition of ecocide. Of course, if Europe has found one voice behind this topic, as we very much hope for. But yes, I think that this is a good point and a great chance to really push the topic forward, and maybe this very webinar here will play a role in this and help on the way. There is a movement called Faith for Ecocide Law. So I'm going to share this webinar, the recording with them, and I'm sure they will be very interested in this, and they will use it to reach out to their already existing Islamic contacts. So one more reason why I'm very happy that we had this webinar, and thank you again very much for you two for proposing the topic. I mean, it was not us that were looking for people talking about Islamic law. It was, we asked young scholars to provide topics. About a year ago, we started to ask around and collecting speakers for our webinar series. And I'm very thankful that you two came up with this topic and that you gave this interesting webinar today. So looking at the time, we are nearing the end. There has been something. There's one more question. Is it a question? Musicians are also a way to elevate the cause of ecocide. Ah, yeah. Good point. There is another network, culture and arts for ecocide. So yes, there are lots of very important groups of people that we are trying to address in special ways. For instance, just a couple of days ago, we founded the network Oceans for Ecocide Law. So this is a very important topic as well, because as you probably know, lots of countries are talking about the seabed and how to extract resources from the seabed. So, if I'm not mistaken, there are no more really questions at the moment. So if there are no more people asking things, I would say thank you very much. And
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yes, and thanks to everyone for sticking around and listening.
Yeah, listening. Thank you.